Welcome to tonight's Dharma time. I'm glad to see you. The topic is the 26 qualities of the Sattvic person. A reminder that it's in the Bhagavad Gita that we learn about tamasic, rajasic, and sattvic qualities. And while each of the gunas is inherently a non-judgmental word, it's a descriptor word. They're like inherently neutral in terms of our judgment about them. They also have auspicious and inauspicious manifestations. So tamas, out of balance, becomes inert and sluggish and lazy, unconscious. It goes to ignorance. Rajas, out of balance, becomes greedy and avarice and pursues things in what we would call a horizontal rather than a vertical manner. Horizontal meaning personal desire, personal will, personal consumption. And sattva, out of balance, becomes more disassociated, more disconnected, less embodied. So the 26 qualities of the sattvic person are actually qualities we're all aiming to cultivate. And I like to say, ever since I've been studying yoga, the question for me has been, do we cultivate those qualities or are we remembering them? And I come to rest again and again that the answer is both. We are remembering these native qualities of heart, these 26 qualities of when the human being shines at his or her best. And we have to cultivate the qualities because our lives tend to go a little out of balance, tamasic, rajasic, or sattvic imbalances. So we're going to sit for a while in silence, and I'll play these different bells for you. And I want you to keep in mind that in each of the bells, the sound is already contained within the bell. It's when the bell is rung that we hear the sound, but the sound is actually in those bells already. Do you understand what I mean by that? This is not meant to be a Zen koan, but some of you look a little spaced out when I say it. The sound is already in the bell, and you'll have the blessing of hearing the bell, and you'll hear it also go back to silence. Even as the bell goes to silence, the sound of it is still in it. Do you understand? It's okay. So let's sit for a little bit of quiet together. And when you rest in silence, consider that these qualities of heart, they are already within you. Invite your mind to rest in the native experience of your heart, the sattvic heart. Invite your mind to take refuge in your heart's capacity for the absence of wrath and the absence of greed. Your heart's capacity for forgiveness. Those qualities, like the bell sound, they already exist in us. And let the bell sound be a reminder to your mind that those innate qualities already exist in your heart. And follow the sound to silence where your mind can drop down into your heart. Invite your mind to lessen its attachment to its own chatter and to return to the qualities of the Sattvic heart. As you rest attention in your heart, consider the natural qualities that are sattvic, like truthfulness, lack of conceit, the absence of greed. As you hear the bell sound, follow it back to silence, the mind, and follow itself back to the heart. If your mind wanders away, quietly bring it back to the possibility that this sattvic heart, these qualities already exist in you, like purity of mind and cleanliness in body and speech and actions. Consider your own naturally sattvic heart, the luminosity or equanimity that would shine through you. If there weren't disturbances on the surface of the water, ripples, raindrops, the water becomes reflective and clear. Like this, visualize your heart's capacity for steadfastness, for the absence of restlessness, for generosity, truthfulness. And you may join your hands together in Anjali Mudra. And while you join the palms together, further imagine the native experience of the Sattvic heart in your fellow human beings, both near and far. Actively use your imagination to feel the native qualities of the Sattvic heart in fellow humans near and far, past, present, and future. With appreciation that we get to be amongst these countless humans who have the Sattvic heart, let's bow the head to the heart, please. And you can release your hands and open your eyes. Now I'm curious if anybody, when I said, okay, fellow human beings, near and far, past, present, and future, if you sort of feel that swell and then you say, yeah, but, like it's a disaster out there. Did that happen for anybody? It's okay if it happened. It doesn't mean that you're not sattvic. That's still underneath the yeah, but is pointing to part of our current day reality. It wasn't that far afield from our ancestor yogis' experience of reality either. When they didn't have computers and electronics and so on, but there were difficulties, and there were interpersonal difficulties, and there was the judgment that is a part of human nature, and there was classism and racism and inequalities of all kinds. So they also face some of those disturbances like we do. So when I invite you to feel the indwelling sattvicness of the human heart, yours, how does that go? Okay, I'm getting a kind of like más o menos response there. And when I invite it on behalf of fellow human beings, past, present, and future, does that sound like more relaxing or more distressing to you?
More needed in the world.
More needed in the world, yeah. Like, what if we recognize that potential is indwelling in each other more often? And if we recognized it in present moment conflict, it would be very powerful medicine. If we were able to manifest that in present moment global conflict, that would be very powerful medicine too. And so I ask these questions because it's quite likely, I know most of you relatively well, and it's quite likely that when I say, imagine that sattvic heart in fellow humans, near and far, past, present, and future, that in your heart there's an immense yes. Like, you would see that indwelling potential. You have a sense of that. But I also know how actively involved you are in community and ecology and social justice, and I can imagine your mind also coming up with yes, but, or yes, and, or yes, that may be, but. We also have these challenges that we face, these disturbances, these devastations, in fact. So what do we do with that dilemma as yogis and yoginis? There's a number of you in the teacher trainings right now who are in the room. What do you imagine the teachings of yoga would recommend to us about that dilemma? This dilemma, that's our dilemma. What would yoga recommend?
Like Ishvara Pranidhara, or we just surrender to a higher power.
Okay,
Yeah.
that is a possibility that yoga would say, okay, here's this existing dilemma. Let's practice surrender to the higher good. That surrender, however, Ishvadi Pranidhana, comes after clear action. So clear action and surrendering our attachment to the outcome of the actions. Like doing our best, but surrendering our attachment to it being about us, or about being recognized for how clear we are with our actions. And also surrendering how the time frame of the other person's relief from suffering might happen, because we may not be able to see that in our particular exchange with them. But we have clear action and then the surrender of the outcome, Ishvadi Pranidhana. So we surrender it to the higher good. Yeah.
And clear action might entail...
Well, that is the big question in the Bhagavad Gita, isn't it? What is clear action? What is skill in action? Yoga is defined in the Bhagavad Gita as skill in action. So that is, the question is, are we acting, and you could say, are we acting dharmically?
Skill in action or skill in action? I didn't...
Skill in
skill
action.
And or in?
No, skill in action.
In action.
Yeah, in action. Like skillful actions, clear actions. We might say yogic or dharmic actions. Now, if we are acting in that way, we're probably coming from these 26 qualities. And so another dilemma that we face as contemporary yogis and yoginis is we might have skillful action and we want to lessen suffering, but sometimes skillful action is truth-telling. And somebody else might find that offensive. Maybe their personal narrative doesn't want truth-telling at that moment. So on occasion you find skillful action is creating a little distress between you and somebody else. Has this happened to anybody? Just checking. You are having the human experience, right? What else might yoga recommend when you look at these dilemmas?
To sit quietly.
Mm-hmm. Yes, to come to a more quiet mind. So yoga would say, in terms of finding clear action, if you're in the mind states, if you're disturbed or dull, those aren't great places to act from. If you're distracted, that's a little bit better. If you're able to produce one-pointed mind, that's even better. But if you're experiencing lucid mind, quite likely the skill in action will be more obvious to you, less colored by your own thoughts and your own conditioning. So to come to lucid mind, we practice the tools, the practices of yoga. Mindfulness, for example, and breathing and asana, and hopefully a clear diet and good rest, and so on. So that our minds are more translucent and able to have intuition come through as to what is clear action. Mm-hmm. And what else might yoga recommend?
Loving kindness.
Yes. So we look at the dilemma, and yoga could say, towards fellow human beings, towards ourselves, towards the perceived flaws that we see around us, we practice loving kindness. May all beings be free from unnecessary pain and suffering. And may I not contribute to further pain and suffering. Which sometimes means that we're actually restraining ourselves. Restraint is one of the 26 qualities. Self-restraint. That we're actually restraining ourselves from acting if we aren't in a clear, lucid mind. If we can't offer loving kindness in that moment, or we only have pseudo-loving kindness, it's like, may all beings be free from unnecessary pain and suffering as long as I get my way. Then we have to actually practice restraint before acting. So seeing where we are we out of balance or closer to being in balance? Does the heart feel receptive and capable? That's an important pulse to take about yourself before acting. And loving kindness can help bring us back to the clear heart. Yeah. Somebody else was going to say something. What would yoga recommend?
Well, it's
Yes.
probably relating to what you just said. I was thinking awareness and somehow deep acceptance of the dilemma, but not letting it restrict you. So acceptance somehow.
Yeah.
It's just that it's there and be aware.
Yes. Yes.
And then work from there.
In the current community, like contemporary community, we talk a lot about radical acceptance, which is a bigger concept than acceptance. Radical acceptance meaning even when you don't want to, even when the circumstances look very painful. Radical acceptance is like accepting reality so that we can lessen our resistance to what is occurring and come into relationship with the here and now. And in that acceptance, we don't become passive or apathetic. In fact, on the battlefield, when Arjuna is standing out there with his 100 cousins across the way and his teacher giving him guidance, he keeps saying, I don't want to do it. I don't want to take action. And essentially, Krishna has to tell him to accept his place in the community. He was raised for this particular dharma. So as he accepts the actual fundamental reality, he can then take clear action. But if he's in resistance to reality, he's like fidgety, petulant, argumentative, he's irritable, he's frustrated, and you could picture arms crossed on the chest and turning away from his teacher, who is his beloved teacher. So acceptance doesn't produce apathy. In fact, Arjuna tempts his teacher Krishna with apathy. He says, forget it, I don't want to act. I'm not playing this role. And his teacher says back to him, that's not an option. Actions are always occurring, and the choice for inaction is still a choice. You're still making an action. Which sounds a little bit like a Zen koan, but if you look really clearly, like look at toddlers, you have this opportunity. Inaction is a choice sometimes with a toddler. So we see actions and inactions are actually woven together. Coming into acceptance, it's courageous, means coming into alignment with reality, as it is at this moment. I'm not saying it should be different or it shouldn't be like this. It is the isness. We sometimes say it's the suchness of the present moment. And yoga would also recommend what I started to refer to earlier tonight. Yoga would recommend that when we see this dilemma, we spend time cultivating and remembering. And those are two active processes, cultivating and remembering the 26 qualities of the Sattvic heart, so that we become agents of change or transformation by our own realization or liberation or our capacity for love. That we as humans are then adding less to the fray. And we also become possible portals or vessels for solutions. But so long as we're adding to the fray by being disturbed by it, we're still adding to the fray. Do you know what I mean by adding to the fray? It's okay. Whether it's in your own household or your community or on the bus or in your own mind and all those inner community members I talked about last time. The 100 cousins across the battlefield that Arjuna is battling are actually aspects of the human mind. This reminder that he's adding to the fray when he's in his resistance, his reluctance. So cultivating these 26 qualities, I find it very interesting that the first quality recommended for the Sattvic heart is fearlessness. We say abhaya, fearlessness. That's a relatively big ask of the human heart. Fearlessness. Fear is primal to the human system because, well, at a biological level, the species wants to keep going. And so your preservation is a part of the biological imperative of the species. So programmed into your brain is fear of death, which also can become fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of not getting your own way, fear of pain, fear of illness, fear of disappointment, and so on. Fear of being too cold or too hot, or too lumpy or bumpy. Fear of not having your needs met. Fear of having too many needs met. Fear of not being loved. Fear of being loved. So what's recommended is fearlessness. So if you were to consider fearlessness, how would you practice such a thing?
Try to let go of past and future expectations and just breathe into the present moment.
Yeah.
And welcome those thoughts, see them for what they are, invite them in, and then let them go. But just try not to resist them, and try not to further them either.
Yes. Yeah, in yoga we call this, you're pointing to something that I'll name in Sanskrit. It's called abhyasa and vairagyam. That means making an effort, a good effort, and also surrendering or non-attaching. So the thoughts are rising, you make the effort. Well, I'm welcoming it as it is, like a bird in the sky, but I'm not reaching up to tell the bird what to do. And when the bird passes through the sky, I'm not clinging for it to come back. So in this open evenness of mind, we can do something that yoga calls lessening the coloring of your thoughts. So to go back to, you said past and future, to go back to how do thoughts get colored? They are first conditioned to be our thoughts and our belief systems. And then we practice repeating those thoughts and those beliefs, and they get more colored, more densely colored. Like if you put a white linen in the vat of red dye, and you pull it out pretty quickly, it has some red, but it's not deeply colored yet. And maybe washing the white liquid promptly takes some of the red dye out of it. But if you keep exposing the white linen to the red dye for longer periods of time and more consistently, it becomes deeply saturated as the color red. Likewise with our thoughts, if we keep repeating them and exposing ourselves to them consistently and ongoingly, they get more deeply colored. And the practice of yoga, on the one hand, is to lessen the coloring of our thoughts so that the mind becomes more translucent. So each time we have a fear thought, and we might want to start with warm-up poses, like little fears, like not like big head honcho fears. You could start with fear of being too cold, for example. And you could practice standing in an ambient environment that isn't as warm as you'd like it to be, and lessen the coloring of your fear thought about getting too cold. Like you could actually practice that. Should you practice something such as lessening the coloring of the fear of being too cold, you'll probably also develop a skill in your body. Ancient yogis were taught to sit in snowy places and melt the snow around them by regulating their body temperature. That's kind of far out there, but really cool stuff too. I think equivalent to that is lessening the coloring of your fearful thoughts. So I'd recommend you spend more time lessening the coloring of your fearful thoughts than trying to actually melt snow with your naked body. Unless you're at Brighton Bush Hot Springs and you've been in the hot tub and then you go in the snow, you will experience the melting of the snow around your naked body. And that's a sensation to be enjoyed. Now I'm promoting craving. The absence of craving is one of these things up here, I'm pretty sure. So we start by lessening the coloring of fearful thoughts. And fearlessness is the first Sattvic quality. The second is purity of heart, which I liken to a quality of also, innocence, or that heart that isn't so laden by the mind, having all those sedimentary layers of thought and belief in the way. The innocence, the purity of heart. I don't mean naivete when I say purity, and neither does the Yoga Sutras. They don't mean naive, like just like a bubble of ignorance and naivete and happy-go-lucky. I sincerely mean like a clear or pure motivation in the heart. When I talk about the sedimentary layers of the mind, I mean all those habits that are compressing our ability to drop into the heart. That compression, when relieved, we realize the existing underlying fundamental purity of heart. And sometimes you get to taste that in your own heart in a moment of other human suffering that calls forth your compassion and kindness. And even sometimes the hardest heart, in the face of somebody else's suffering, you see their tenderness come through. So in that regard, helping the dilemma at large, one of the answers is not removing yourself from all dilemmas, but considering the possibility that being near to suffering might actually help you remember the purity of heart that is underneath your fear. I mentioned like fear of being too cold or fear of being too hot, fear of being too uncomfortable, but also there's fear of being too close to somebody else's suffering. So this is what I mean by coming back to the pure, clear heart, with the possibility of that happening by being near to, proximal to suffering. And see if your native heart might actually surface because of that. if fear is in the way, it will be less likely to occur. Do you understand what I mean?
It's like from a child, you would say, or
The-
generally,
yes.
every child.
In fact, it is childlike in the sense that the thoughts and beliefs that we now have, each of us here, we are all at least over the 16th year of our biological lives.
No.
We are. Each of us is older than 16. Some of us are 16 times 4. Is that me? Am I that? No, times 3. Almost times 3. I'm 47, so maybe almost times 3. That being said, the childlike nature of our minds, those thoughts are less colored at that time. Now, they can become really deeply colored if there are painful thoughts that keep happening, like in a family system. It keeps recurring again and again. That gets very deeply colored. But our minds are more flexible when they're younger. And so when I say childlike, when we say that in yoga, I don't mean like the childlike brain that doesn't have as much awareness of itself, but bringing that childlike quality back into today's current awareness. Like, let there be awe and wonder, openness, fearlessness. From the purity of heart, we then lean into what's called steadfast, becoming more steadfast. And steadfastness actually literally means, my teacher from Mysore, his name is Shankaranarayana Joyce. It's hard to say, so we call him Acharya, which means beloved teacher. And he likes to talk about steadfastness as the traveler making his or her way up a mountain. And that steadfastness is required to climb the mountain, because the body will get tired. And the mind might lose sight of the goal when it goes around a certain switchback. It might not see the apex of the mountain. Or the weather may be turbulent at times. He says yoga is like climbing the mountain steadfastly, even when the weather patterns are coming and going. So with fearlessness and purity of heart, we climb the mountain and we are steadfast in the movement towards the goal of yoga. And that goal in yoga would be like awakening from human suffering and helping others to awaken from suffering. But if we are distracted, if we vacillate a lot, if we kind of go up the mountain but then forget we have to go back for the flashlight, or we go up the mountain and then we see a tiger, we say, oh no way, I'm not going, or we go up the mountain and think, wait, I should bring my friends with me, I gotta go back and get them, or we say, oh wait, I gotta go to the Columbia sports store and get the right outfit, I forgot to do it, I have an employee pass, I should have gone yesterday. If we are distracted by all these options, we won't be steadfast. It seems so obvious when you talk about hiking a mountain, all those distractions you could have. But if you look, even maybe it's obvious in your own life how steadfast is vacillating right now. And if you don't see it, you might have to look more subtly to see if you are vacillating. Like you have a primary heart life goal, and when are you vacillating from that? And what are the nature of your vacillations? Probably our vacillations, if we go back to fear and non-purity of heart, our vacillations are obvious to us. Do you understand what I mean? You don't feel judged, I hope. I mean, the mind vacillates. It's a part of the process. And we're looking to vacillate less. So we could say steadfastness is non-vacillation. And you come to dana, and dana means generosity. It means to give. So in this juncture here on the 26 Sattvic qualities of the heart, if we had been fearless and we had been pure and we'd been steadfast, the natural next thing will be the outpouring of our own generosity on behalf of others. And when they say dana, to give something like to give support to the teacher. In traditional Buddhist teachings, the teacher doesn't have a paycheck, they are offered dana from the students. But dana is also like to give a piece of your meal away, or to give of your heart or your time, to give of your service. Lessening your attachment to the things you now own. It's really specific. It isn't just that you're giving and you're generous, you're lessening attachment to ownership of things, material and otherwise. So you travel more lightly in the world that way. Dana is a Buddhist concept, and Buddhism and yoga met blessedly. You see them interwoven, and we get to study them as sister paths, very compatible sister paths. So you practice dana, and then you're going to practice self-restraint. Does that sound incompatible to you?
No, because if you gave away everything and you have nothing left to sustain yourself, then you're not practicing ahimsa.
Right, yes, and non-injury, yes, right down here, ahimsa. Right, so self-restraint, thank you for that. It does mean you can't give it all away, because like on the airplane, you have to put the air mask on your own face before helping somebody else. There are times where some people misunderstand dana and they give to the point that the life or the body are breaking down. So self-restraint also means, it specifically means restraining the sense impulses that would distract you or disturb your mind. The sense impulses means like what you see, what you taste, what you feel, what you hear, and so on. It's restraining desire from taking over. Like the flame of desire can become a brush fire. It's something that can happen when you've practiced dana. You start to feel this ownership of your own goodness. There's a place to have self-esteem for sure, and to acknowledge the goodness of your own heart. But sometimes people in dana practice, they start clinging to themselves as the person who's good. So self-restraint also means not to let your mind grasp onto your identification with, I'm the person who does dana very well. Do you understand what I mean by that? You're not clinging to the attachment of, now I shall be known as the person who gives. Mm-hmm. So, and self-restraint is also that this doesn't have to be just a linear path here, but it is also, for some of us to practice self-restraint is to practice what I call non-impulsivity. Non-impulsivity means, for example, the text, ding, and you feel you have to look at it right away. This happens to some of you? Mm-hmm. You trained your mind to hear the ding and to look at the phone. You trained your wrist to turn the phone. So self-restraint might be, when you hear the ding, not to look. But for some of you it might be not to turn the wrist, not to reach the hand towards the phone. Like the different layers of what you have to restrain.
Or to turn the sound off altogether.
The sound on my phone is actually always off. The phone is on, but the sound is off. Which is why I say, text me before you call me. I won't hear your phone call. So you can turn it off. It's a way to practice self-restraint. But then if you turn the sound off, as I've done, even so, sometimes I like to just check the phone randomly. I'm just walking to the bathroom. Why do I have to check the cell phone for the emails? I'm just taking a biological break for the moment, but I'm checking the phone. So self-restraint is leaving the phone. Who takes the phone to the bathroom with them? Just tell me honestly. Again, how helpful is that? So self-restraint for some of us means some things. For others it means not letting Netflix decide you're watching the next episode. So self-restraint, you can apply to your own life. Sometimes it means not saying the truthful thing because at that moment it would be the unkind gesture. Or self-restraint may mean that you have to take a period of rest before the next service opportunity. That the body needs some care. You can't give it all away and still have more to give. There is a biological reality that needs our tending to. Also in the 26 qualities, they include what is called here religious rites. I'll remind us that in the Bhagavad Gita, we hear about the path called Raja Yoga, which includes the practice of ritual. And I was saying last time we were here how people everywhere have rituals. Some of them are mundane. A very common ritual that I help my students with looks like this. I'm just pretending with these child's play. This is a common ritual that some of my students have when they get home, even from yoga class. It means they open the fridge and start eating, standing in front of the fridge with the door open, and then they take the food articles. That's what my teacher calls them. Food particles, food articles. He has, English is not his first language. It's very obvious. You take the food particles or the food articles over to where the TV is showing the Netflix and they're eating. That's a ritual. Now, it might not seem like a ritual, but it's ritualized behavior. We have rituals, how we brush the teeth or how we decide to wash the hair, how you get in your car, how you signal when you're going to make a turn. Those are rituals. So the human mind likes ritualized behavior. We like some sense of, this is how I do this particular thing. This is how I hold my salad, for example. This is referring to the larger need we have for ritual, which is ritual that gives thanks, that provides a gesture for us to give gratitude back to consciousness or God or love, whatever you'd like to call that. Or to have a shared ritual where we're all remembering the larger divine presence. So if you can make rituals that are helping you to remember that larger divine presence on a more regular basis, then the Sattvic heart becomes more capable of flourishing. Since many of our rituals are not about remembering the divine on a more ongoing basis, we actually have to outnumber the inauspicious rituals with the auspicious rituals. How might you do that? To outnumber the inauspicious, sort of mundane, unconscious rituals with more auspicious rituals.
Probably start by making them conscious rituals.
Yeah. The rituals you now have, you could bring mindfulness to them. Like mindful toothbrushing. Today when I was brushing my teeth, I felt very happy to brush the teeth. I was thinking, somebody created toothbrushes. I have an electric toothbrush, which I love, my electric toothbrush. It lasted all the way through India. The battery kept going. I was thinking how fond I was of the creator of the toothbrush and the creator of the electric toothbrush and the people who made toothpaste and how the tube is made. And I was having this all-out fascination. It was like a global event, just brushing the teeth. Gratitude that all of this was provided for me to enjoy brushing my teeth. And Tristan can tell you that I brush my teeth a lot in the day. I am a compulsive toothbrusher. But if you use the toothbrushing as a mindfulness of the larger presence and support in your life, then you're remembering. Like to mindfully eat and realize the blessing of food that we have available to nourish the body. Or to mindfully turn the signal in the car and think, somebody created roads, traffic lights, and little pieces of paint that tell us where to be on the pavement. That connects you back to the larger community and the larger presence in your life. So make those rituals more conscious, more mindful. And they too can then become kind of religious rituals. You understand? But I mean religious in the sense of spiritual. I don't mean it in the sense of dogma. So what are some that you might use tonight when you leave this Dharma talk? What ritual habit do you have? Like, it doesn't take long to pop open a beer, but you could do it mindfully. Speaking of my husband. I know that ritual will be occurring at about 9 o'clock. I know the sound of the beer cap on the kitchen counter, even if I'm in the other room. What else? What are some other things, though? Just casual things you keep doing that you could make a potent moment of remembering.
I enjoy the ritual of you mentioning at the end of our Dharma talks to remain more quiet as you leave and contemplative, and that just, for me, that's a wonderful ritual after the talk, and just kind of marinating in what was shared and the experience in my body versus going into chatter and the mind, and so I enjoy that ritual. That's more, yeah.
Well, we'll be sure to have loyalty to that one tonight for you.
Thank you.
What about something else? You do it on a regular basis, and yet it could be the sacred ritual for you for tonight. Yes?
I was just going to say walking in the front door of my home.
Yeah.
Just crossing that threshold.
Yeah. Like how amazing of a home to go to, and there's probably some warmth there, and there's human contact, and the door is on the hinges and the house is still upright, and there's probably colors in your home that you guys chose, and you can remember the fondness of that. And so ritual can really bring your heart to life. And I mean life like, here we are, having this life, and so precious, and easy to forget some of the preciousness. So yeah, just when you open the door, pause.
Every night when our 3-year-old sleeps with us,
Mm-hmm.
and every night when we go to sleep, my daughter and I cuddle, and I say, "What's my favorite time of day?" And she says, "Cuddling with Liv."
Oh. And it's true, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. What a great ritual to have. It's, you can gaze into her eyes and see the majesty. I mean, that big presence, divine presence, shining through her unique eyes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. In fact, go ahead.
Sorry.
AJ.
I was going to say for me, it's taking my shoes off when I come to the house. I'm not a shoe horse, is that the term? By any means, but it often gives me pause when I take my shoes off and we have them lined up by the front door. It's not even all my shoes or everybody in the family shoes, it's just a collection of shoes, and I look at them and I think, like, how amazing is it that I have a pair of shoes that I, by this door that I put on when I go to the chickens. I have a separate pair of shoes by the back door that I put on when I take the dogs out to go to the bathroom. I have boots, tennis shoes for running. Like, I have an abundance
Mm-hmm.
of shoes for so many different tasks that enrich and define my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like so much gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I see my children's shoes, crap about my children's shoes. Like when I see my children's shoes lined up, the same thing, that I can provide an abundance of activities for them.
Mm-hmm. That's terrific.
A prayer.
It's the tears of the clear heart. Yeah. These sorts of tears I really appreciate. It's like those sedimentary layers in the mind, like this. These are the tears that make the fountaining of the heart to come through those layers. Doesn't your heart feel a little bit bigger when you cry?
As soon as I can breathe again.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing. Like, so much abundance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hope you'll gaze at your children's shoes tonight and have your tears. Thank you for that image too. Yeah. So from that we go to what's called right study. And I mean, the word right doesn't mean like right and wrong. In an English sense, it means skillful or clear. It's choosing the right path of study. So when Arjuna's on the battlefield out there, he's being directed to be a devotee of karma yoga, a practitioner of yoga in action. He wants to be the devotee of the renunciation of yoga. He wants to be more like, could I just please for a short time be a jnana yogi or a raja yogi? Could I just be a bhakti yogi? He's not actually saying this to his teacher, but I can imagine him begging on the sidelines. Could I just try these other paths? And his teacher says, no, your path is karma yoga. So when we say right study here, it means like, what is your path? How will you know? And how will you follow that? How will you study it very clearly? And if you've chosen to study yoga, you've chosen a significant responsibility. It's an honor, it's a privilege, it's a luxury, in fact, because you're not just facing basic survival needs, but it is also a responsibility. And that's what Arjuna hears from his teacher as well. You have a responsibility. So right study means in the choice of study, then doing that clearly and methodically and consistently, which requires the next of these self-discipline. And self-discipline, as most of you know, I call that self-nurturing discipline rather than self-discipline, because in our culture, I think the way we interpret the word discipline is more punitive and rigid. And here, self-discipline means the discipline to stay with your study, the discipline of the senses so they're not pulling you away, and the discipline of the mind that it can't consistently distract, intrude, or chatter away at you, essentially. So if we say self-nurturing discipline, it means the discipline to nurture your best possible clear heart, the discipline to nurture your best possible vitality so that when you're of service, you have something to give. And the discipline to nurture the best possible mind state through which your speech and actions will happen. That says a lot. For some of us, self-discipline, let's say you've chosen to study yoga here under right study, but you forgot to hydrate yourself. You're going to soon have a hard time even reading the words on the page. If you don't have a consistent daily nurturing practice of hydrating your brain and your body, you'll soon have a hard time doing the study. So self-discipline will help your study. It will also make it easier to be straightforward, which is the clarity that we go forward with. So self-nurturing discipline, sometimes we are just starting with the basic discipline of care for the physical body. If you haven't had enough calories, it's hard to keep your mind clear on the study. If you have had the wrong kinds of calories, the foods that make you feel like a big sugar change for blood sugar, it's hard to keep your mind clear on the study. So self-discipline is also the discipline to come to your yoga mat on a daily basis, to sit in quiet, to contemplate, to practice the arts of yoga. Straightforward is the next of these, and straightforward in this case is a little bit like steadfast. Steadfast is the effort to keep doing the thing. As I was saying, my teacher uses the analogy of the mountain. Straightforward is to say also taking the most direct path to yoga. My teacher is primarily Indian, and Jay knows him. Some of you met my teacher years ago. Did you meet Acharya when he was in Portland? He's profoundly Indian. I'm saying because some of my other teachers are Indian and they've been to the West, and they're more like a mix of the two cultures. But for Acharya, when he's talking to Westerners, one thing he realized is the Westerners can take this path steadfastly, and yet they're not straightforward. So they're steadfast, but they're not being direct. They're steadfast and they're meandering. So he was talking about the mountain of yoga, and that in the West, we're kind of circling the base for a long time. We are circling the base of the mountain in asana, 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 asana. And he is recommending that we start going up already. So when he comes to the West, he wants to teach the pranayama and the pratyahara and dharana and dhyana. He's like, we will climb the mountain, and he wants to be more direct because he feels he has short time to be here in the West when he's teaching, and he's in his later years, so he has a short time left to be a teacher, relatively speaking. He's 70. So he's saying, let's be more straightforward, let's be more direct. And so sometimes you're fooling yourself just a little bit. You're being steadfast, still doing it, still doing the downward dog, right? But sometimes you are also where you're deceiving yourself about how direct you're being, about how straightforward you're being. Am I reading it clearly? This is happening for some of you? Yeah. So like making a really good plan, being steadfast about the plan, keep designing the plan on the piece of paper, keep writing the to-do list for the plan, keep the plan very clear, keep it close at hand on your desk, but it's still sitting there, and so are you. So straightforward is you now have the self-discipline and you have the direction from the right study. You are going to take action. You're going to be direct about it. So it's like non-postponement and non-distraction combined. Does that make sense? I see your lives transforming overnight here. I got to clean the closet today. It was so refreshing. First I had the food poisoning issue this morning, and so I couldn't go to the prison, so I had time to clean the closet. I've been wanting to clean the closet for some time, and every time I looked at the closet over the last many months, I was like, I really want to clean the closet. My side of the closet, and his is organized, mine was not looking so well. And every time I saw it, I thought, I don't have time to clean the closet right now. I felt just that little bit of disappointment and deflation. And I said, I'm going to go be of service. Oh, it's all better. It's true, I love to be of service. However, I also wanted the time to clean the closet. So being able to clean the closet, I felt refreshed. And I got to do, I thought about it for a few minutes. And then I thought about thinking about it for a few more minutes, and then I just went and did it. And that's what I mean by straightforward. You had the thought, you have the time, now's the time to do it. So straightforward, direct action in the direction of your yoga. Of course, following that is non-injury. So with ahimsa. So not to the point of injury, right? Because sometimes we decide we're going to be direct right now, we're going to go do it, but actually we are disguising impulsivity as steadfast or direct or straightforward. So with non-injury to self and others. Non-injury. This is a significant concept, big enough that it was Gandhi's primary commitment. And it's the first of the yamas and the niyamas, ahimsa. It means non-violence. Here it's translated as non-injury. Not to cause harm to self or others. So we might make the choice for straightforwardness or directness, and we also want to consider non-injury. And that's followed by truth or satya. Just like in the yamas, they're the first two yamas, ahimsa and satya. So truthfulness also means truthfulness with ourselves. How refreshing it is to be truthful with oneself in the company of other humans who have the capacity for empathy. And how difficult it is to be truthful with oneself in the company of other humans who are still in conditioned mind, where the coloring of their own thoughts is still looking through the lens of judgment or punishment or envy or comparison or ill will. So learning to be truthful with ourselves, we also need to have an empathetic heart. And we might have to practice by being truthful with others so we can learn it for ourselves and to feel in the light of their pure heart or their clear heart or their fearlessness to be in our presence when we do our truth-telling, that we might come to that truth-telling more fearlessly with ourselves. Would you say that you, relatively speaking, you know when you're sort of being dishonest with yourself? Do you have like a little feeling in the body somewhere? When that happens, what do you say to yourself about the little mistruth? Like, is being more truthful inconvenient right there? Oh, you say shh. What does that mean in Dutch? So what does that mean in Dutch, I said?
Yeah. In Dutch? No, I'm looking at. See, I'm forgetting my own language.
Maybe shh is universal, I don't know.
I know. Yeah, how do we say, I forget it, sorry. But it's probably, we have in the same ways, yeah. I don't want to say the S word because, you can't say that here. So we did say that more there. That's why I say shoot.
I see.
We say it easier in Belgium. Yeah.
Yes,
so I see, I'm thinking, doesn't come in my mind what I'm normally saying, so sorry.
That's all right. I understand. I feel endeared. Thank you. When the mistruths come up, you have it in your body. You can feel it there. And generally, I think what people end up saying to themselves is some variation of it's inconvenient or not now or okay later or, thanks but, or there's a little justification that comes on board. And so, ahimsa. And then satya. First being nonviolent and then you're telling the truth. So sometimes the mistruths are actually little acts of violence against our best possible outcome. Like this ahimsa, satya. What if the mistruth is setting you back or causing your heart to feel less pure or feeding the fear? Making it difficult to have self-restraint or self-discipline? The little mistruth, it doesn't matter right now if I do this thing again. It's actually like a little drop of water repeatedly on the stone, making a pathway there. So to come into honesty with ourselves, it's very courageous. And I'll say again, I think it's a privilege, a precious opportunity to do that honesty in the presence of someone else who can provide empathy and the space that's non-judging, so we don't feel so overwhelmed by our own little mistruths.
It's also interesting that the root of the word courageous comes from kur, which is heart.
Yes,
So if you're speaking your truth from the heart, it is a courageous act.
it is.
And that can be really hard to do, and it takes timing and it takes consideration, and sometimes the greatest truth can be not just, this isn't the time, you know?
Yes. Yeah. And if what happens is the heart feels open and clear, we want to offer the truth, but we don't have words. Sometimes the truth is coming through the expression of the body without the language. And that's, for someone who's listening with his or her whole body, they can still hear what it is your heart is saying. And if words come, that can be very helpful also, but sometimes we haven't much practice with the words that say the truth, the vulnerable truth. So we do need to try it on, like building the muscles for downward dog pose. We build the muscles for the courageousness to say what's true. When I was living at Brighton Bush Hot Springs, we used the phrase a lot, speaking your truth, but it actually meant telling somebody else what your opinion of them was. And so speaking the truth, as I hear you referring to it, is like, what's in my heart? What is that is vulnerable, honest, earnest, overwhelmed, confused? What is that might feel helpless right now and is asking for love? And how might I share that with another human being honestly, or with myself honestly? So we don't misunderstand that speaking our truth is me telling you my opinion of you, because that was the culture at Brighton Bush Hot Springs. I saw that went pretty far awry pretty quickly.
There's the example in King Lear where the third daughter, Cordelia, whose name comes from the root of heart as well as courageous, that she's asked by her father to pump up his ego, and he goes, "How much do you love me?" And she says, "Nothing, my lord."
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not gonna further your need for this pumped up self-love, and that's her answer, and she doesn't get anything.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because she loves him so much, she doesn't have to say anything. It's all heart-centered action is what her actions will speak louder than her words throughout the play.
Oh.
But Shakespeare has a great example of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I wasn't aware of that character, and I love the name, Cordelia.
Yeah, she's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Two
Yeah.
other sisters have no problem pumping up her father's ego,
Mm-hmm.
and they get in big trouble.
Oh. Yes. It's like the story here in America, the emperor has no clothes on, and how difficult it was for the one who saw clearly to say something.
And for the one to hear the truth as well. The father couldn't hear the truth
Right.
at that moment either. He came to hear it later, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Shakespeare couldn't, yeah.
Yes. Yes, I think in fact fearlessness, going back to fearlessness, if we are being offered the truth of somebody else's experience, our hearts, practicing fearlessness, we're going to hold space and empathy more wisely for them. And sometimes the person has something to tell us that we were also involved in. So how do we stay open and receptive for what is true for this other human heart that we were dancing with? We were collaborating with their experience. We made a contribution. Maybe it was a painful contribution. And their need to tell us about it. Hopefully they can come to us and we bring our fearless, pure heart to that conversation. So then on the other side of this board, I'm going to manage time here by choosing some of the highlights. So let's say we're in interpersonal dynamic and we're looking for that clear, true, fearless heart. We have the absence of wrath, the absence of fault-finding, and the absence of greed. These are three of the qualities of the Sattvic heart: absence of wrath, absence of fault-finding, and the absence of greed. Isn't it astounding that this is from generations ago, thousands of years ago, and they discovered that the absence of wrath, the absence of greed, and the absence of fault-finding would make the heart more clear? And that somehow they identified in their community that there was wrath, fault-finding, and greed. It must have existed for them to realize it's problematic. And it still exists today, of course. So the absence of wrath is like the absence of the urge to blame. The absence of fault-finding, the absence of telling somebody else what's wrong with them. The absence of greed is like the absence of wanting it to be different. Also greed in terms of possessions, material possessions. We also have gentleness and modesty as two of the qualities of the Sattvic heart. What do you think of this word modesty? What might that mean to you, modesty?
Reminds me of myself.
Ah, very good. Okay. Should I ask Joel? What do you think, modesty? How will that make your heart more sattvic? How might it come from the naturally sattvic heart, modesty?
I think your ego tends to be not modest. And of course we talk about the ego's not all bad, but the immature ego tends to not be very modest and need a lot of fluffing up or building up. And so I think you need to practice that in order to kind of tame some of that down. So it's not always a competition, everything that you're entering into.
Yeah. Yeah, and so let's say when we talk about ego, I'm going to use the concept of a spectrum, because we know that developmentally the ego does play a role, and it's important to have what we call in the West here a healthy sense of self. And that healthy sense of self can then practice expanding beyond the self to what's called the transpersonal self. When we talk about transcendence, we're talking about transcending in that sense. We also know that on the spectrum, a less than healthy sense of self, if this is healthy sense of self, we have down here on this pendulum like no sense of self, including no sense of esteem or worth or value, like deeply embedded shame. On this side we might have like absolute sense of self, but it's distorted, like a bully, or like more the need for power or arrogance, or like pride beyond what's reasonable. So those two sides of that spectrum, that pendulum, are actually equally vulnerable. One looks more powerful than the other, but they're both vulnerable states of being. And so when we look at healthy sense of self, for the person who's on the pride, arrogance side of the spectrum, to practice modesty may mean self-restraint about getting the acknowledgement, like just quiet little humble tasks that they can do without needing to be acknowledged, like karma yoga. Clear action without attachment to the outcome, without even need of acknowledgement of yourself as the one acting. But on the other side of the spectrum, I think a lot of people actually struggle to be affirmed, acknowledged, to feel that their contribution mattered to somebody, and to accept that they contributed and it was meaningful. So when there's a less, on this side, less sense of value, less sense of self-worth, less of a sense of self, to realize you're making a difference and to accept that is also an act of modesty. There's not grandiosity there, but it's accepting that there's a self called you that's contributing to the experience of another, and they want to appreciate. And to stand there and welcome that appreciation, we'll have to be modest enough to do it, not too attached to our lack of esteem. You know, people are like, oh no, it was nothing, it was nothing. And they sort of keep brushing that off. One thing that happens there is we don't get to have the delight of saying thank you for your contribution to my life or my moment. So to accept somebody is asking to say thank you to you for your actions is a way of partnering, collaborating. Both people can experience modesty. Do you understand how I'm saying that? Mm-hmm. I think it's something in this country right now, a pretty big dilemma, because this pendulum is happening, and for people to feel acknowledged and appreciated, and to practice appreciations that are specific about other people's contributions to our lives, that would be a practice where we can rest in modesty. We don't have the need for the inflation, but we're also not profoundly deflated. And to realize that we're contributing to other people's lives is like such an important place for the pure heart. We're contributing. We make a difference. We can be people who make a difference.
Joy,
Yes.
could you also see in modesty just the quality of dissolving barriers between self and other, so that it brings you into it's not really about ego, but it's realizing you don't do anything. There is no doer, right? There is no difference between me doing it and it being done. So it's a connection also then with something bigger than...
Yes, I think that developmentally, if you look at this pendulum, the person down here who didn't get to develop a sense of self, they might be biologically 20, 30, 40 years old, but for them to go to the perspective you're talking about, they have to have a sense of self that realizes, oh, I'm not the doer. But sometimes they've been so downgraded by their developmental experiences that they already have a sense, I'm not the doer, and I can't do anything, and I'm not contributing anyway, and I don't matter. I haven't mattered. In fact, I've only been a problem or a burden or a difficulty for other people, so why even try? So these are the narratives that I hear in the history of the lives of the people that I'm working with at the DOC, the Department of Corrections, excuse me. So when I hear this in their history and I see that they're now training to be teachers, yoga teachers, to give to other inmates on the inside, I'm watching their developmental trajectory actually over the course of 7 months grow from, you're watching this also, grow from I have nothing to give and I'm on the inside anyway, locked in here for the rest of my life and I can't help the circumstances inside or out. I see them growing from there up to I have a sense of self, and this thing called teaching yoga is going to come through me. I don't see them, they're not coming over to pride and arrogance. It would be a big stretch to get them to that side of the spectrum because the shame has been so deeply embedded already. So in response, I'm saying yes, and a consideration, where is that person on the developmental spectrum able to say, actions are occurring through me, and I have a sense that there's a vessel here, and it's self unto self, as we say in Karma Yoga. The self and other fall away. Am I responding all right? You understand? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's very sad to see people can go decades, 7 or 8 decades, and not have had a sense of self. So the great need to be acknowledged or seen or remembered or praised or lifted up, the great need is so tremendous. But if we were talking with them about that which acts through us, that presence that shines through our eyes and our hearts, they may have a sense it's so wholly disembodied that we might not be able to come to that place you're talking about. I want us all to experience that for sure, because it's a very vibrant and restful place to be, where we recognize that. I suppose maybe I spent too much time on this side of the spectrum with clients and students. So, do you want to respond to any of that, Jay? Was that dreadful what I had to say there? You're all right. This is feels like heavy or morose now. Uh-huh. Yeah. Do you know people in your life where you sense their self is like a hungry ghost? It will never get satisfied because it actually isn't, the sense of self isn't there to be fed. Do you understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And you might have people on this side of the spectrum who keep needing affirmation, more affirmation, more affirmation, more affirmation, that's sort of feeding them. They feel, like, now I exist. And for them to come back to modesty feels like, oh my God, I won't exist. I'll stop existing. So those are developmental issues in somebody's psychological trajectory. And they're real. But we can help by being a stable, like a Sattvic heart for them, that they can sense, well, we value you. You're whole and real and you exist, and there's this thing called modesty of thought and action. Yeah. Another I wanted to touch on, these ones here, this little clump in the middle. Radiance of character is considered one of the Sattvic qualities of the human heart. Radiance of character. I'll just go, Mataji. She's our teacher in Rishikesh. I posted her photograph on Facebook. I was so proud of my skills. I saw the little camera icon, and I thought, well, you push that button, something else happens. Because we lost Jay's photographs when his phone went for a swim in the ocean. I got the photographs from someplace else on the internet. I got them from Susan's Dropbox. I was like, or maybe that's Google Drive or something. I felt so accomplished to get this photograph posted. But I wanted to share Mataji's radiance of character. She's also incredibly modest as a human being, and these qualities exist in her radiantly. And one thing she said in her teachings when we were in Rishikesh, she was teaching about the Bhagavad Gita, and she said this consistently: keep the company of sages. So if you don't feel you have radiance of character, be near to people who do have radiance of character. It will become contagious. And she said, keep the company of sages. I asked her, well, how will the inmates do that if they're on the inside? And similar to what Jesus said in his teaching, she said, satsang is happening. Satsang meaning sitting in the truth, sitting in the company of wisdom is happening. Sometimes between you and you, remembering, and sometimes between you and the one other who's gathering with you to remember. So radiance of character, like your luminous heart. And sometimes we need the tears to make us more radiant again. What do you think about this one, radiance of character? You want to be radiant?
I think that was one of the things that yoga really presented for me, that, and even Buddhism, that you didn't need to grow spiritually, didn't need to be this shrouded and, very
somber?
Yes, somber, stoic experience, that it was actually supposed to make you more joyful and lighter and easier in the world. And sometimes I don't think that's how it's presented, especially now that dogmatic thinking's been around for a long time. It's supposed to sort of be degradation and,
Yes. I have seen that, and I also turned away from that. What I have found most compelling in choosing teachers in my life is the light, the luminosity that comes through their eyes and their hearts, not just when they're teaching, but when they're walking from the teaching back to their dwelling, or because when we go to see Saras, and she's from Chennai, but we saw her in Goa this year and last year in Mahabalipuram. She comes from her home to be with us in southern India, and this time we were sharing a dwelling, so Jay and Saras and I. And you just have a sense of her ongoing, luminous, committed, quiet presence. She isn't one person in the classroom and another person somewhere else. And I've hosted a lot of teachers in my time as a younger yoga teacher and a younger studio owner, and they were different people in my home than they were in the classroom. That lack of integrity was very surprising to me. And it was also good teaching for me to realize what I didn't want to see happen to myself as a yoga teacher. I mean, I'm just a yoga teacher. These are teachers, but I wanted integrity in them. And it just reminded me how much integrity is important to me. And I don't want to just walk into the classroom and be radiant and then walk out and be like, dark and petulant about bookkeeping. I did that twice this week, though. It's the week of the 1099s. Do you know what I'm talking about? So twice I got to be dark and petulant about bookkeeping. And the computer was going too slow, and the QuickBooks wasn't loading fast enough, and where were the Social Security numbers? Oh my God, who didn't do their job? Right. It's like, no, well, actually...
I think for me it's authenticity as well. I kind of picked that up pretty quick. Certainly not perfect, and not perfect pretty much everywhere I go, but when I meet someone who's not very authentic, or I'm not being very authentic about things.
What you might ask yourself in those moments, so when I think of radiance of character, I'll give you my translation of this. I do see that in all the teachers that I've chosen to have as my teachers, and those who are long-term teachers for me, it's unwavering. Acharya, he's older. I met him 12 years ago. So he's quite a bit older, but his presence still shines through. And I met Debu, who's our music teacher and our friend, really, when he was in his 20s. And the delight, the innocence, the radiance that shines through him when he's playing his music, and when he's like teaching the Westerners to sing, something like Om Bhurbu Vasvan. The students all get it wrong, and he's like, great, okay, we're not on key, and we're not like together, and you still see, so he's with us. It doesn't matter to him that we aren't like great singers, and we're Westerners learning this thing, and we're fascinated by his culture and his music, and so on. And the way that I like to define or see radiance of character is what is shining through us at any one moment. And authenticity is one of the things, when it shines through the human heart, that wakes up the authenticity of other humans. We start to simply feel fundamentally safer. And that safety relaxes the mental chatter and the mental habits and the sedimentary layers that have fallen away, and what's authentic in you sparks what's authentic in someone else. And by authentic, when I say this, I mean like what's capable of love and generosity and compassion. I don't just mean authentic like how you can complain really well, or how you can gossip like really honestly. I don't mean it like that. I mean the authentic, the fullness of the Sattvic heart. When you see that, you feel that, when you have that vibration shared, it wakes both people up. And that's how I feel as soon as I see Debu or Acharya or Saras or Mataji, like, big yes, and beyond. So that kind of radiance is also, it lights the flame of the others. And it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm the one lighting the flames. It's modest at the same time. And the two others that I wanted to make sure we have here, forgiveness. We could have a whole Dharma talk. We could have like 25 Dharma talks on forgiveness. We could have years of Dharma talks on forgiveness. But forgiveness is one of the significant qualities of the human heart when it's in that Sattvic, the Sattvic expression. Forgiveness, in this case, refers not to any sense of condoning somebody else's behavior. It's not an approval of somebody else's actions, even of your own. Forgiveness makes it possible for your heart to move on from a difficulty, but also to see the fundamental humanity in the other that might be disturbed or distorted or just unnourished enough that it's acting poorly. But forgiveness also, we realize, we too could have that quality of behavior. We too might be sometimes distorted or disturbed or just off-center enough that we've done something that was injurious or not straightforward, or we did something that didn't have the absence of wrath or the absence of greed. So forgiveness is a little bit like dropping the story so that your heart is free to see and feel again the humanness of the other, or of yourself if you're practicing self-forgiveness. Somewhat like acceptance as a practice, you then come back to your inner resources for making amends if necessary, for creating clear boundaries if necessary, and for finding clear action going forward from that. But while we're in non-forgiveness, we don't have access to the resources of the Sattvic heart. We are disconnected because we're up in the mind, holding the resentment or the pain or the hot burning coal in our hand while it's burning through us. The other person may already have given it away. That's why we're holding it. I think somebody said resentment is defined as, what is it? How they say about the poison? Resentment is yes, drinking poison and hoping somebody else will suffer. Is that how it goes? Yeah. So forgiveness is in response to resentment, like realizing, oh, I'm holding this toxicity in me. It's causing me suffering, but I'm hoping it's going to cause them suffering. So forgiveness is to free both people. Most of all, to free your own heart. When we come up against something where we say, that's unforgivable, we would do well to pause, breathe, reflect inwardly at our humanity, and ask, where are the samskaras alive most in me right now? So the healing can be about your own inner experience before you have the offering of that forgiveness to somebody else. Sometimes people feel it's too soon. I can't offer that to them because I'm not healed yet. is probably true. But if we're still holding the hurt and we're not actively working on the healing, then we are actively working on feeling more toxic. So if it does feel too soon to forgive the other because we are not ready, we have to go back to truthfulness with ourselves and to non-injury, not causing harm to ourselves by continuing to hold that which feels toxic. Coming back to straightforward, direct, what action can I take on my own behalf for healing right now? Sometimes it starts with self-forgiveness. There's an interesting website that I was able to visit earlier today, because again I didn't go to the prison with being home ill. One of my early teachers in life is Stephen Levine. Do you know who I'm talking about? And he died recently. He wrote a book called The Gradual Awakening, which was a part of my graduate school course. And then he wrote a book also called Who Dies, which I read earlier in life when my grandmother died. It was so powerful. And he was in New Mexico, and I had been many times in New Mexico, and he used to travel to teach, so I got to see him in different venues. And I hadn't kept up with his work because he's been living with Andrea in relatively secluded circumstances by their own choice. But they have on their website a page for apologies. People can go post an apology anonymously to anybody about anything. And the apologies are interesting to read because in some of them you can see the clarity, the Sattvic heart offering the apology. In some of the apologies you can see this person might have a character disorder. You're looking at this apology like, this seems very off, this one here. So should you choose to go read the apologies, read it like for the way your heart feels stirred by the words. And you'll have a sense which ones are more Sattvic apologies, which ones might be just a little bit off. Yeah. It's very moving to see. So this is a little bit in the same experience of forgiveness.
I think we can say something about self-forgiveness.
Yes.
It's true for me, maybe for some other folks. I feel like self-forgiveness for me is more difficult than forgiving the other, because when I forgive the other, there's space, right? And I can accept that I cannot control what the other is going to do ultimately. But when it comes to self-forgiveness, that's so difficult because there's this wanting to cling to the pain of judging yourself. Because on some level you believe if you don't let go of that pain, you won't do it again. But then we can all see examples, I can see so many examples of where clinging to that pain actually seems to cause me to do that thing again. Yeah. And even though I can intellectually understand that, it's so hard to let go still of that judgment. Yes. So it's interesting. Thank you both. Enjoy the babysitter. It's interesting to consider that the other one I wanted to talk about tonight, and I'll close with this, is lack of conceit. That's how it's said here in English. It's translated from Sanskrit. So denying self-forgiveness, denying yourself self-forgiveness, you have to look at conceit. Now, I'm not implicating just you. I appreciate how you said, maybe this is for others, but certainly for yourself. And it's true, what you're saying is also the human experience. We have this concept that if we forgive ourselves, we might act badly again. But actually holding on to the unfortunate behavior increases the likelihood of doing it again. Because some part of us, if you think of yourself as like a little inside community, some part of you is justifying what you did. And some part is defending against being blamed or criticized or punished for what happened. And some other part is thinking, well, no, it's okay because I just did it that once. But then there was a satisfying outcome. On some level, a satisfying outcome occurred. So it's tempting to do it again, the thing. And so self-forgiveness is like forgiving all those inner community members for their chaos, essentially. But it's also lack of conceit. Like if I can forgive others, why hold myself out of that heart? Why am I special enough that I don't deserve forgiveness from myself? Do you understand what I mean by that? Because your human vulnerability is the human vulnerability you see in the others as well.
And the cool thing about forgiveness is it actually frees you up to act more wisely the next time. Because again, you're not burdened by the feeling of toxicity, even from you to you. People sometimes have the phrase in America, I could never forgive myself if I did such and such. That would be a very painful way to live.
I just read a quote today and kind of feel that could relate even, and it's one from Wayne Dyer. If I believe I can do it, chances will come up. If I don't believe I can do it, obstacles come up.
Yes, yeah, very true.
So there's something in that.
Yeah, yeah.
Self-forgiveness getting to, again, kind of what you're saying with the truth, where you're saying just speaking my truth, where it can get, where it can be a barrier as well when you're forgiving yourself constantly for the same.
Yes, that's called apathy or resignation.
Yeah.
That isn't self-forgiveness. I mean, forgiveness has in it the quality of actually realizing the pain, which you're talking about, AJ, very beautifully. You realize the dilemma you're causing yourself. It recognizes that pain is present and harm has occurred. And apathy and resignation don't. Like, all right, I'll let it slide this time. We're not actually feeling the pain we've just caused. It's less painful to let it slide. Until the bigger pain comes of how many times you let it slide and you really feel the compounded nature of that. So forgiveness is actually very freeing to become a better expression of yourself, not a more harmful expression of ourselves. Yeah. Any last questions or comments right now? This is like going to a buffet and having like a lot of interesting food all in the same place. And I didn't check your appetite when you walked in the door because you came and I made an assumption you're very interested. It's Friday night, it's totally raining and dark out there, and Portland knows how to drive in the rain. About 50% of us are Oregonians. It seems like people coming here from other states are not driving that well in the rain. So you made a diligent effort to be here. And a lot of information was offered. So let's sit in a quiet time so that you don't have indigestion when you leave. That's what I was saying. It's like going to a buffet. So please take a comfortable and upright seat. You can use the wall if you need support for your back. Rest your hands in your lap as you like. And rest your attention again on the possibility of your own Sattvic heart, connected to the web of Sattvic hearts, past, present, future, near and far. And actively invite your mind to rest in your heart. Don't think about what's happening after Dharma time. Rest in your Sattvic heart here. Soak it in. You have the company of others. We may join our hands in Anjali Mudra. As we rest in our sense of our own sattvic heart, may we see clearly that indwelling potential in all others, in all beings, near and far, past, present, and future. And may we also resist the urge to demand that they know that about themselves or about us. May we simply see it very clearly, very lovingly. Thank you for being together tonight to nurture this in your own heart and in our community. Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste.